If Marvel Rivals is your first time playing a hero shooter type of game, then the goal of this video is to help you understand the concept of the game and how it's meant to be played, and just how to improve at the game in general. Of course, people who have played Overwatch have an advantage in this game because the genres are very similar. So now, as a former Overwatch player who has moved on to Marvel Rivals, I'm going to try to help you understand the game a little better. And I did hit Eternity in Season 0, so I would like to think I at least have a good, solid understanding of the game. But with that being said, I don't want you to take everything I say as 100% the truth. Just because I have experience doesn't mean I am not prone to being wrong. So I say this going forward, I'm going to share the knowledge the best I can, but don't take my word as everything to live by when playing the game. Moving on though, obviously Marvel Rivals is a 6v6 hero-based shooter where everyone in the game has abilities. Now let's look at Overwatch for example, because Overwatch teaches a core mechanic that this game ends up expanding on. So in Overwatch, every character is unique with their own abilities, and you can pair certain characters together because they have better synergy than others. So for example, back in the old Overwatch days, there was a meta called the Grav Dragon, which is where Zarya would use her ult and suck everyone into the center of the black hole, and then Hanzo would combine his ult for basically a guaranteed team wipe, implying that both the ults were synergized together well. And the point I'm making here is certain characters go better together than others. And that's going to be a key factor in every hero-based shooter pretty much that ever will exist. And then specifically Marvel Rivals, because they introduced a mechanic called team-up abilities. Now, I'm not like a Marvel lore person or anything. I haven't really seen any movies at all. So I don't really know exactly where the synergy comes from to begin with. I assume the team-ups are based around lore. But in the game, this is basically the dev saying like, hey, these people go really well together if you want to run these people together. So they're kind of doing even some of the synergy work for you in that aspect. That being said, people synergize regardless of having the team up or not. If you want to see every team up in the game, on the main menu, you can go to Heroes and then click Team Ups, and you can see every team up that there is in the game right now. Or if you want an even better way to kind of experiment and see all the team ups in the game, you can go into the practice range and come up over here to the right and press G, at least if you're on MNK, on this thing up here, and you can see every team up in the game and even experiment with them just by clicking who you want and then clicking try it out. Now, that being said, just because there are team ups in the game doesn't mean you always need to force one. For example, Cloak and Dagger I would say is one of the best supports in the game, but you really never use her team up because no one ever plays Moon Knight. But just because you're not getting a team up with Cloak and Dagger doesn't mean it's not worth running Cloak and Dagger. Let's look at Rocket, Punisher, and Winter Soldier together for example. So when I'm here in the firing range and I click on Raccoon, the team ups that can show up with Raccoon will show up down here where I'm hovering my mouse. If I hover over this Groot icon, you see Groot on the left and Raccoon on the right. And what that means is Groot is the one who gives the team up in this scenario. The person who gives the team up will always be on the left side of the screen when you hover over down here. So this means without a Groot on the team, obviously I can still play Raccoon, but I am getting no team up because the Groot is not on the team. But if I move to the right with this bullet icon, you see Raccoon is on the left, which means that Raccoon is the one who gives the team up. So now if someone on my team picks Punisher or Winter Soldier, I am basically in charge of when I can give the team up to these people. I just wanted to bring this up because the team ups in this game, some of them are genuinely very strong. And it's even a way to make characters who would not be so good as a standalone hero actually viable. In this case, if you were to compare Rocket to all the other healers in the game, he's really not as good as they are. But if you look at this team up and you have a Punisher and or a Winter Soldier on your team, you could argue that Raccoon might be one of the best supports in the game. So of course, I would assume most people have already experimented with team ups in this game, at least to some extent. But because this is a beginner guide, I at least want to show one example of it. And I'm going to show you just the difference that this one team up alone does in terms of DPS. DPS meaning damage per second. You can see here, I'm on Punisher. This is how you normally shoot. It's a decent shooting speed, and then obviously, reload when you run out of your bullets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spawn Raccoon to give me the team up bonus. So you'll see here the difference in how much Punisher can do. just by having a raccoon on his team. And Rocket's team up basically makes it so Winter Soldier and Punisher have a faster fire rate and they don't have to reload at all. So basically unlimited ammo. I also want to add, because it seems like there's a good amount of people who don't know about season bonuses in this game. Season bonus meaning that certain characters will have an extra buff for that season we're in. So like right now we're in season 1. And certain characters are better because they're in season 1. This is not to say that they're going to lose their season bonus next season. So for example, Hawkeye in season 1 right now has a season bonus, but when we move on to season 2, that doesn't mean Hawkeye will lose his season bonus. They might keep him in it or they might remove him. To see who has a season bonus, when you're on the hero select screen here, look at any of the character icons. In the bottom left, you'll see a yellow icon right here where my mouse is hovering. If they have this icon, that means they have a buff for this season. So if I click on Hawkeye and go down here where you see team ups also, you'll see on the left season bonus and 15% damage boost. So for this season, Hawkeye is doing 15% more damage than normal. It's kind of just like a cool little way that they can buff and nerf characters without actually directly having to touch the character. Now let's talk about the roles in this game and how they're meant to be played. So in here, you have Vanguards, otherwise known as tanks. You have Duelists, also known as DPS. And you have Strategists, which is also known as healers or supports. Now, not that this is always the best way to go, but typically, the best team composition in this game will be 2 tanks, 2 DPS, and 2 healers. Sometimes it makes sense to have 3 healers or 3 DPS and 1 tank. It just all depends on what comp you're playing and then also what comp you're facing at the same time. But in general, while you're learning, at the very least, I would say 2-2-2 is the way to go. Starting off with how to play tank in this game, your main goal is to really create space for your team so your DPS and supports have room to move around and make plays. And pressure the other team enough to the point where they can't just keep forcing forward on you and run past you and kill your healers. Also, as a tank, if you have it in your kit, you also want to peel for your healers if you can. Peeling for your team means that you are using an ability or just, you're doing damage to a certain character in an attempt to kind of stop the other team from just forcing space on you and being able to walk past you and just kill your backline. Your backline meaning the people who sit behind the tanks, which will be DPS and supports. Normally, there's exceptions. And your front line is your tanks, basically, the people who play forward. Your job basically is to make sure your backline stays alive. Don't be one of the tanks who sits behind their team the whole game, because if you're doing that, that means you're not playing tank right. Next, we have DPS, where your goal really is you kind of make an opening for your team, and you share that with tanks in a way, because tanks can also do that depending on the scenario. But since DPS typically do the highest damage, you're the one who can kind of burst somebody and kill someone and make space for your team to make something happen. So in a sense, you kind of share what tanks can do, but you have a way smaller health pool, so you can't be as frontline about it. Generally speaking, if your tank is making an opening and you're following up off what your tank's doing and getting a kill off of it, you're doing your job as a DPS player. The only time you don't really have to wait for your tank to make openings is if you're playing a dive character or kind of like an off-angle character, but I'm going to explain what that means more later. And lastly, you have support, which honestly, your main goal is to not die. Obviously, not the only goal, you want to heal your team at the same time. But if you're a support who dies a lot, you make it really hard for your team to ever really accomplish anything. Ideally, to play support well, you're sitting behind your entire team, and you're playing far back to the point where the other team can't just walk forward a little bit and end up being right in your face and killing you right away. So you want to keep your distance away from where all the fights are happening unless you see moments where you can do damage yourself. But really, your goal is relatively simple. Don't die and heal your team. The thing you really have to think of with support is when do you ult? And on support, normally you want to ult to counter the other team's ults rather than use it to start a fight, but that also again depends on your character. You also want to use support ults to match other support ults. So what I mean by this is, say you're playing Luna Snow and the other team's playing a Luna Snow. If the Luna ults on the other team, a lot of the time you want to wait a couple seconds and then end up using your Luna ult because theirs is going to run out first and you're going to have a few seconds of them not having a support ult while yours is still going, and that's the time where you can really make something happen. Otherwise, if you're not doing that, sometimes you can use a support ult to take space. So for example, Mantis is good at this. If you Mantis ult, everyone around you gets really fast healing and a movement speed buff. And in moments like that, your team wants to really push forward and take space while they have a big window of speed and not dying. So that I can't really explain too much in detail over a video. I think you'll learn over time when you should defensively support ult versus when you should offensively use it. So generally speaking, there's two type of roles in this game, and I'm not talking about tank, support, DPS, but a role of a certain character, and you could expand on this and say there's more and make it more complicated, but here I'm going to say there is dive and then there's brawl characters. So dive characters are typically melee based, and they're characters who their main goal really is to just go for the backline, meaning try to kill the healers. Characters that would be considered dive in this game would be like Black Panther, Iron Fist, Magic, Spider-Man, for example. And brawl characters are typically the range characters who are like Moon Knight, Namor, Punisher, Winter Soldier. Dive characters, really, their main goal is to just try to kill healers. And when you're playing a brawler character, your main goal really is to kind of just try to capitalize on whoever you see an opportunity on. Where if you think killing the tank you have a chance to do, then that's what you should be going for. If you can walk past and kill a healer, you do that. It just really depends. I could definitely go into this stuff in more detail, but just remember if you're watching this that this is kind of supposed to be like a in general video. So I'm really trying to simplify things if I feel I can. And if I ever wanted to make like a more advanced guide, then this is where I would kind of really elaborate on things I'm saying here more. But let's move on to another really important aspect of the game that I see a lot of people who even are supposed to know how to play the game, so like high rank players, not do. And that is called counterpicking. Now in this game, and similar to Overwatch, at any point in the game, as long as you're in your spawn room, you are allowed to change your character. Because in Marvel Rivals, some characters counter other characters, and that's how these games are by design. Because it wouldn't be fair if you were just stuck on one character and then the other team ran a counter to you and then you couldn't switch and you're stuck just being countered the whole game. So let me talk about some examples of counters in the game. So Namor would be considered a anti-dive character. So if on your team, your healers say keep dying to a Black Panther, one of your DPS can go Namor to help you try to deal with the backline like the Black Panther. The reason why Namor is considered a dive counter is because he can put down his turrets that auto aim and shoot these characters that are very hard to hit. If you've ever faced Black Panther in this game, then you know a lot of the times when he's hitting you with his combos, you're basically just praying for your life and hoping you don't die. Because he's honestly just too hard to hit when he's doing all his dashes. But at least with Namor, his turrets are going to auto aim and hit the Black Panther while he's doing all this stuff to your healers. Another example would be Magneto against a Wolverine. Magneto, I would say, is a pretty solid Wolverine counter, because if a Wolverine grabs one of your teammates, you can put a bubble on them so he can't do any damage once he actually grabs them and starts trying to hit them with his claws. Or if you're facing a team that has triple melee characters, say there's a Black Panther, an Iron Fist, and a Magic. That team's weakness is anyone who basically doesn't touch the ground. So if you run Iron Man, they have 3 DPS who can't even hit you basically. And you can do this at any point in the game and switch to that character who will counter what you're facing. Now, the important thing to note is you have ult percentage. And if you end up switching characters, you're going to lose some of your ult charge. But sometimes it's worth it. It just depends on the scenario. But you can keep up to 50% of your ult. So say you're at 80% ult and you decide to switch characters to go counter someone on the other team. You will still keep at least 50% of your ult. So you're not completely having to rebuild from 0 to get back to having one. So it's kind of up to you to weigh the pros and cons if losing ult charge is going to be worth switching characters, but a lot of the times, unless you have your ult, I would say it is. So please, all I ask is just to remember that in games like this, it's designed for you to try to run what works well against what you're facing. And this is why I'm kind of like a big advocate to not one trick, because personally, in my experience, I've had a lot of my games thrown because I have one guy who can only play Magic, and no matter what the other team runs against Magic, he will not switch. So, you know, when you get countered also yourself, learn to play other people so you're never in a scenario where you're hard countered and you only know how to play that one character, so there's nothing you can do the rest of the game. Now, honestly, that's about all I have for this video. I don't really know if I left out like something I feel is really important. I can't think of anything off the top of my head at least. But it really was kind of just meant to be like a basic understand the concept of the game. I could make one more detailed. I guess it really just depends how well like this video does. If it does well, then I would assume that people want more like educational stuff. But we will have to wait and see. Hopefully at the very least though, you have learned something.